That antique cannot hit 1,600 yards twice.
Do not applaud yet. 2 hits can still teach the wrong lesson. I did not come here to perform. I came to leave this.
2 plates, 2 confirmed hits. What is in that notebook? Army marksman, 60 years of notes.
And you never asked why I came.
To understand why a Marine gunnery sergeant who trusted modern precision was holding an old notebook like evidence, and why 2 confirmed hits still had not answered the most important question, you have to go back to the moment Daniel Carter carried that World War II Springfield onto the high desert range. The controlled marksmanship heritage event had been running since sunrise. Modern rifles lay beside laser rangefinders, weather meters, and ballistic computers. An officer in charge supervised the event, a qualified range safety officer controlled the line, and every guest firearm and cartridge had been inspected. The rifle in Daniel's hands had passed. Ryan still looked at it as if it belonged under glass. It was a Remington-built M1903A4 Springfield, manufactured during World War II and chambered in .30-06. The walnut had darkened with age, and the bluing had thinned at the edges. Its rebuilt period-style scope sat on a professionally fitted long-range mount. Nothing was neglected or unsafe. It was simply old, and to Ryan, old meant outmatched. At 82, Daniel looked just as easy to underestimate. He wore faded jeans, worn leather boots, a clean canvas field jacket, and prescription shooting glasses beneath a plain tan cap. Silver hair showed at his temples. His shoulders were narrower than they had once been, and he moved with care when the gravel shifted. Yet the rifle rested in his hands with the balance of something familiar, not something borrowed for a photograph. 1,600 yards away, a 36-inch plate stood against a pale hillside. The demonstration lane used a remote camera and impact sensor, while the danger area remained locked and empty. All morning, Marines had tried it with current rifles. The greater problem was the wind. It crossed from the west, reversed near a low ridge, then disappeared in heated air. By early afternoon, the white steel was still clean. Ryan had already decided what Daniel and the Springfield could not do. Daniel did not answer that judgment with a boast. He glanced toward the red range flag, then toward the safety officer. Only if the line remains under her control, the target camera is live, and nobody changes a safety rule for the sake of a challenge. The range safety officer answered before Ryan could. The rifle is cleared, the ammunition is approved, and you will fire only on my commands. Daniel nodded once. Then I will consider it. That answer brought puzzled looks. Ryan stepped closer, but remained outside Daniel's personal space. He expected the old visitor either to retreat or begin defending his reputation. Daniel did neither. Beside his rifle case sat a flat leather document envelope, cracked at the corners and secured by a faded strap. Ryan assumed it contained ownership papers. No one asked. Lance Corporal Ethan Walker noticed the envelope and the shallow repaired scar near the rear of the rifle's stock. Daniel's thumb rested beside the mark without covering it. There was history in both objects, but the old veteran offered no explanation. Instead, he turned toward the valley. Thin flags marked several distances. The nearest pulled left. One beyond the ridge drifted right. Farther out, a third hung almost straight down while heat shimmer ran sideways above the earth. A hawk circled over the northern slope without beating its wings. Ryan followed Daniel's gaze and mistook attention for uncertainty. Looking for luck? Daniel studied the hawk for another second. No, he said. I am waiting to see whether the valley tells the same story as your screen. For the first time that afternoon, Ethan stopped looking at the target and studied everything between the line and the steel. The weather meter beside Ryan showed 3 miles per hour from the west. A ballistic computer displayed a solution built from that reading, the ammunition, distance, temperature, and elevation. Ryan tapped the screen like a man pointing to a settled fact. There is the answer, he said. The equipment has already done the hard part. Daniel read the display, then looked downrange. That is one good reading taken where we are standing. Ryan's jaw tightened. Wind is wind. Daniel pointed without raising his hand above shoulder height. The first flag is moving west to east. The grass below the ridge is moving the other way. The mirage beyond the ridge is almost flat. Which one did your meter measure? Ethan found the patch through his binoculars. Its grass leaned against the nearest flag while heat shimmer bent, straightened, and bent again. He is right about the grass, Ethan said. Ryan gave him a quick look. A ballistic computer accounts for wind. It can, Daniel replied. If you give it the wind that exists instead of the wind that is convenient. Ryan crossed his arms. So you know more than the computer? No. The computer is faster than I will ever be. It also does exactly what a person tells it to do. That makes the person responsible for noticing what the screen cannot see from here. Daniel placed the Springfield on the padded bench, muzzle safely downrange, and opened the bolt. The range safety officer confirmed the chamber was clear and reviewed the sequence. Daniel repeated her commands back accurately. Ryan noticed that the man he had cast as an enemy of science was meticulous about procedure. You have done this recently, Ryan said. I still shoot a few vintage matches when my joints cooperate. At 1600? Not with this rifle for several years. That honest admission gave Ryan back a little of his smile. Then you do not know whether it can still do it. Daniel looked at him. That is true. Daniel opened the hard rifle case and removed a folded shooting mat, ear protection, and a small support bag. The leather envelope remained beneath the lid. When he lifted the mat, Ethan saw the corner of a black and white photograph tucked under the envelope strap. It showed two young soldiers beside the same Springfield, or one that looked exactly like it. Ryan saw it too. Was that rifle issued to you? No, Daniel said. It was built before I was born. Then how did you get it? Daniel's thumb returned to the repaired scar in the stock. From the man who taught me when not to take a shot. Ryan gave a short laugh. That sounds like a convenient lesson when the target is 1,600 yards away. Daniel did not rise to it. Knowing when not to fire is part of knowing how. The range safety officer announced 5 minutes. The remote system confirmed an empty danger area, a reset sensor, and a recording camera. Everyone put on eye and hearing protection. Daniel remained standing. Ryan looked at the clock. You asked for the lane. Are you going to use it? When the wind agrees long enough. The meter has held steady for 30 seconds. The meter is not 1,600 yards long. Ethan watched the nearest flag flutter, the middle one twist, and the farthest barely move. Daniel was not trying to appear mysterious. The evidence had not formed a pattern he trusted. Ryan saw only the remaining time. Let us make this simple, he said. 1 shot. If you hit, I will admit the rifle still has a place on a range. If you miss, it goes back on the display table, and we stop pretending sentiment can beat physics. Daniel's face changed, not with anger, but with a firmer kind of calm. The rifle does not need your permission to have a history, he said. And I do not gamble with a live round to protect my pride. Ryan unfolded his arms. Daniel continued. I will take the shot because the lane is safe, and because I believe I can make it. Whatever happens, we tell the truth about it. No excuses from me. No ridicule from you. Ryan nodded. Agreed. Daniel looked once more toward the leather envelope, then toward the broken wind. He had brought more than an old rifle to the range, and 2 shots would only begin to reveal why. The repaired scar beneath Daniel's thumb had been there for most of his adult life, but the lesson attached to it began in the summer of 1964. Daniel was 20 then, a quiet Army private in a stateside marksmanship program. He had grown up repairing fence on a dry Colorado ranch, where weather could erase a day's work and people watched the sky before trusting a plan. His instructor was Sergeant Elias Avery, a patient man with sun-lined eyes and a voice that never needed volume. Avery kept an aging M1903A4 in the training room. The Army had moved on to newer rifles, but he used the old Springfield to teach a point that had nothing to do with nostalgia. New equipment can give you more information, Avery told the class. It cannot decide which information matters. During one exercise, 3 flags gave conflicting calls across a mountain. Valley. Avery asked which was correct. They all are, Daniel said. Explain. They are describing different pieces of the same valley. Avery handed him the cleared Springfield. Then the target is not your first problem. Daniel watched a hawk ride an updraft and dust flatten near a stand of pine before rising in the sun. The valley stopped looking like empty distance. The target is the last thing the wind touches, Avery said. Read what happens before the bullet gets there. He taught Daniel to challenge simple answers and value restraint as much as confidence. On another day, Daniel waited through nearly an entire firing period without taking his assigned shot. A soldier called him afraid, but Avery asked why he had held. The wind never settled into anything I could defend, Daniel said. Avery nodded. Then you made the only honest call available. The Springfield stock was damaged later that year when an empty rack failed in a locked room. A qualified armorer repaired it, leaving a shallow crescent near the rear sling position. A scar should remind you of responsibility, not romance, he said. We inspect it, we document it, and we do not pretend old means indestructible. After the rifle was lawfully released through a surplus program, Avery bought it and maintained it through qualified gunsmiths. He and Daniel remained friends after the Army, building a shared notebook of weather sketches, successful corrections, and mistakes. The notebook was not a book of secret formulas. Its most repeated sentence was written on the first page in Avery's square handwriting. Observe before you calculate. Daniel worked for a county survey department, raised a family, and volunteered at a veterans shooting club. He never became famous or relied on a hidden rank. He simply spent decades studying terrain, temperature, patience, and judgment. When Avery died, the Springfield passed legally to Daniel along with the notebook and every maintenance record. Daniel added his own pages, but left Avery's first sentence untouched. More than 60 years later, the notebook rested beneath its old photograph in Daniel's envelope. The range's civilian historical coordinator had invited him to bring it, then been delayed elsewhere. Daniel could have used her letter to demand courtesy when Ryan mocked him. He chose not to. Courtesy forced by a document would disappear with it. Hot wind returned against Daniel's cheek as the range safety officer announced 2 minutes. Daniel secured his hearing protection. Ethan unfolded the mat. When Daniel lowered himself toward the ground, his right knee resisted. Ethan offered an arm. May I help, sir? Daniel accepted it. My pride says no. My knee has seniority. This time, the Marine's smiles held no cruelty. Daniel settled behind the Springfield without touching the trigger. The rifle was no miracle, and neither was he. A hit would require an old barrel, approved ammunition, changing air, and one aging man to work together honestly. Ryan raised the spotting scope. The range safety officer gave the final command. The line went hot. Daniel did not look through the scope immediately. That bothered Ryan more than hesitation would have. With permission granted and every eye watching, Daniel still studied the valley above the stock. The nearest flag pulled east, the second showed a weak drift, and beyond the ridge the mirage leaned west before standing nearly vertical. Ethan could identify the clues through binoculars but could not combine them. Ryan checked the time. The firing line meter is steady. Daniel kept his eyes downrange. I know. Then what are you waiting for? A pattern I can defend. The range safety officer raised one hand. The lane belonged to Daniel until he fired or declined. As seconds passed, he moved from flag to grass to mirage, reading a sequence rather than one force. Then the nearest flag softened. The strip of grass below the ridge stopped leaning west and stood upright for less than a second. Farther out, the mirage began to flatten. Daniel lowered his cheek to the stock. Through the low-power optic, the plate was a pale shape trembling in heated air. Daniel's pulse moved the reticle more than it had at 20. Age had not given him magic, only the humility to work with the body he had. He lifted his head. Ryan let out a breath through his nose. Lost your nerve. Daniel remained calm. The far wind changed. Ethan looked at the distant mirage again. A moment later, he saw it bend. It did, he said. Ryan turned toward him. You are spotting, not coaching. I am confirming what I see, gunnery sergeant. Daniel was no longer the only person questioning the easy answer. Another minute passed with his hand clear of the trigger and the muzzle safely downrange. He would not force a shot to save face. The wind eased again. This time the near flag relaxed first. The grass at the ridge followed. The mirage beyond it held a shallow, consistent angle instead of reversing. Daniel settled behind the scope. His breathing slowed. Ryan watched through his scope. Ethan watched the camera, and the safety officer watched the line. After one full breath, the Springfield fired. Its report rolled into the hills. Daniel held safely downrange while the remote camera showed an unmoving plate. Ryan began lowering the scope. Then the steel kicked backward. A delayed metallic ring crossed the valley as the sensor flashed green. The plate swung. No one cheered. Surprise was too complete. Ryan leaned harder into his optic. Camera replay. Ethan replayed the feed. Clean plate, gray splash left of center, moving steel. The sensor confirmed a new strike. Fresh hit, Ethan said. 1 round fired. 1 impact recorded. The camera and sensor existed to keep everyone honest. Neither cared about the shooter's age, rank, or reputation. Ryan checked the image, replay, and sensor log. Extraordinary results deserved verification, but once every source agreed, verification became a place to hide. Could be a lucky break, he said at last. Daniel opened the bolt and waited for the safety officer's direction. He did not turn around for admiration. It could, he said. Then Daniel added, luck deserves the same honesty as skill. If you want to know which one that was, reset the sensor and give me the adjacent plate. 36 inches of fresh white steel stood several feet to the right of the first target at the same distance. It had not moved all day. The safety officer checked the schedule. You have time for 1 more approved round. Daniel nodded. Ryan stared through the glass at the second plate. 1 hit had broken the laughter. A second would remove the last refuge for every excuse he had made. The safety officer called the line cold before the second attempt. Daniel opened the action and stepped away while the system reset. The Marines gathered around the monitor. Replay, distance marker, sensor, timestamp, and ammunition count all confirmed the first hit. Ryan studied the image in silence. Ethan stood beside him. You wanted the truth about the shot. I see it. Do you? Ryan looked sharply at the lance corporal, but Ethan did not retreat from the question. Respectfully, Gunnery Sergeant, you checked the target 3 ways. All 3 confirmed the hit. You still called it luck before you said it was good shooting. Rank allowed Ryan to end the conversation. The evidence did not allow him to win it. 1 hit does not prove the rifle can repeat, he said. It was narrower than Ryan's original claim. When the line reopened, Ethan helped Daniel to the mat, then stepped behind the boundary. Daniel loaded the second approved cartridge only on command. This time no one mocked him. The wind had changed more sharply. The near flag showed a stronger push from the west. Halfway downrange, dust curled along the base of the ridge in the opposite direction. Far beyond it, the mirage boiled almost vertically. Ryan checked the firing line reading. You had a better window 5 minutes ago. Yes. Then this is worse. For now. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. The clock counted down. Ryan shifted his weight, but did not tell Daniel to hurry. The first hit had changed what he was willing to say. Daniel lifted his cheek from the stock and rested his eyes. Are you stopping? Ryan asked. I am waiting. What if the window does not return? Then I leave with 1 hit and the truth. Daniel had defended his right not to turn a live-fire decision into theater. Ryan had treated refusal as weakness. Now he saw someone prepared to walk away without forcing a result. Then Ethan saw the near flag begin to sag. The middle dust fell almost with it. The far mirage tilted but held. The pieces became stable enough to understand. Daniel returned to the scope. No one spoke. The Springfield fired a second time. The report crossed the range. The plate stayed still through 1 heartbeat, then another. Ryan stared through the spotting scope until his eye watered. The second plate snapped backward. The impact tone sounded on the monitor, followed by the delayed ring of steel across the valley. 2 shots. 2 separate plates. 2 confirmed hits at 1,600 yards. Ethan replayed the image. The second mark appeared slightly right of center. The sensor log recorded 1 round and 1 strike. Ryan reviewed it without being asked. Behind him, a Marine who had laughed at the rifle whispered, he did it twice. Daniel opened the action and waited for the range safety officer to clear him. Only then did he sit upright. Ethan moved forward and offered his arm again. Daniel took it, rose carefully, and stretched the knee that had protested earlier. The Marines began to applaud. Daniel lifted 1 hand. Please do not applaud yet. The sound stopped. Ryan lowered the spotting scope. His face held none of its earlier amusement. Why not? Because a hard shot can teach the wrong lesson if all you remember is the man who made it. Daniel walked to the bench and placed the Springfield in its padded case. He left the action open until the safety officer completed her inspection. Then he reached beneath the folded mat and removed the old leather envelope. I told you I did not come here to perform, he said. He unfastened the faded strap. Inside lay the black and white photograph, a typed invitation from the range's historical coordinator, and a thick handwritten notebook whose pages had been repaired with archival tape. Daniel set the notebook between himself and Ryan. This is why I came. The first page carried only 4 words beneath the name Elias Avery. Observe before you calculate. Ryan read them twice. The notebook was not polished. Its cover had softened at the corners, and its pages carried pencil lines, faded ink, old coffee stains, and careful dates spanning more than half a century. Some entries belonged to Avery. Others were Daniel's. There were sketches of ridges, arrows showing layered wind, notes about mirage, and short descriptions of shots deliberately refused because the conditions could not be read with confidence. Ethan leaned closer without touching it. "You brought this for the range?" Daniel handed him the typed letter. The civilian historical coordinator had invited Daniel to donate the notebook to a small marksmanship heritage collection used by instructors and visiting veterans. She knew Daniel through a regional shooting club and had arranged for the M1903A4 to appear at the day's display. The rifle was never part of the donation. It remained Daniel's. The notebook was the gift. Ryan looked from the letter to the two distant plates. "You could have shown me this when you arrived." "I could have. It would have explained who you were." Daniel met his eyes. "You knew enough to treat me like a person. You knew I was a guest. You knew the rifle had passed inspection. Everything after that was a decision." The Marines behind Ryan grew very still. Daniel did not list every insult. Ryan remembered the museum jokes and the demand that Daniel prove his worth. "I was hard on the rifle," Ryan said. "You were careless with the man holding it." "You were an Army marksman?" Ryan asked. "I served in an Army marksmanship program when I was young. Afterward, I worked as a county surveyor. On weekends, I helped at a veterans club when they needed another set of eyes." "No special unit or famous record?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Not unless the county kept one for straight fence lines." Ryan had expected a concealed title powerful enough to justify Daniel's confidence. Daniel offered none. His authority came from preparation, judgment, and how he behaved before anyone respected him. Ethan found entries comparing instrument reports with observation. At the bottom, Avery had written, "A machine is not arrogant. The person refusing to question his input can be." Ethan looked toward the modern equipment on the benches. "This does not say the old way is better." "Because it is not," Daniel said. "Better equipment is better. The mistake is thinking it removes the need for attention." Ryan glanced at the firing line weather meter. Our numbers were accurate. For this firing point, at that moment, yes. "And the computer?" "It calculated what you entered." Daniel pointed toward the valley. "You gave it one wind value for a place where the wind changed direction more than once. The machine did not fail you. It obeyed you." Daniel had not defeated technology with instinct. He had improved the information technology required. The range safety officer joined them with environmental logs from sensors positioned across the valley. They could show how the air had changed during both shots. "The historical coordinator asked me to preserve the notebook if Mr. Carter delivered it," she said. "Before I accept it, he has one condition." Ryan looked at Daniel. "What condition?" Daniel closed the notebook gently. "I do not want it locked in a cabinet and admired because it is old. If this range takes it, instructors use it. Start with the first page." "How do we prove we are using it?" Daniel turned toward the firing line. "Clear every rifle. Keep the line cold. Give your Marines 10 minutes to read the valley without a screen. Then compare what they write with the sensor log." The safety officer nodded. "That is an observation exercise. I can authorize it." Daniel held the notebook out to Ryan, but did not release it yet. "You wanted me to prove the rifle deserved a place here," he said. "Now show me whether the lesson does." The safety officer cleared and verified every rifle, locked the bolts open, and removed ammunition from the benches. On the cold line, the Marines carried only binoculars, notebooks, and pencils. Daniel stayed behind the safety boundary with them. "Do not try to guess my answer," he said. "Write what you can support." Ryan began with the firing line flag. Daniel stopped him. "Start anywhere you choose, but do not stop with what is closest." Without pressure to fire, they noticed details ignored all morning. Dust disappearing before the first ridge, grass moving above still brush, and mirage changing angle near cooler ground. Ryan wrote last. His notes began as copied numbers. He crossed them out and wrote, "Steady push near line, shelter below ridge, weak reversal beyond, uncertain movement." "Near target," Daniel read over his shoulder. "Why uncertain?" "The mirage near the target is boiling. I cannot defend a direction." Daniel nodded. "Then uncertain is the honest answer." Ryan looked at him, recognizing the same principle Daniel had used when he refused to rush the second shot. After 10 minutes, the sensor log showed strong movement near the line, weaker flow before the ridge, and a brief reversal beyond it. Fixed point readings did not perfectly match wider visual estimates, but both revealed the layered pattern the first entry had ignored. Ethan compared his notes with the graph. The wind never had one answer. It had several true answers, Daniel said. Your job is deciding how they relate. At Daniel's first shot, the near wind had fallen, the middle nearly neutralized, and the far wind held. At the second, a different pattern became briefly stable. You waited for the disagreement to become consistent, Ryan said. Daniel considered the wording. Close. I waited until I could explain the disagreement. Consistency does not always mean the air moves the same way everywhere. How did you know the window would return? I did not. Ryan looked up. Then you were prepared to leave after one hit. I told you that. I thought it was confidence. It was a limit. Ryan had tried to force Daniel into the role of genius or fraud. Daniel had refused both. He would take a defensible shot or not shoot. One Marine asked whether Daniel could teach them his exact wind call for the target. I can tell you what I observed, Daniel said. But if I give you a magic number, I teach the same mistake in an older voice. Daniel asked each Marine for one observation and one uncertainty. When a corporal gave a poor explanation and apologized, Daniel shook his head. Do not apologize for an unfinished skill. Show me what evidence would change your answer. The corporal looked again. If the far angle holds while the near flag drops, I would separate the zones instead of averaging them. Good. Now you are thinking. Daniel made mistakes answerable to evidence. Ryan had made doubt answerable to humiliation. The safety officer entered the layered observations into training software. Its prediction changed significantly from the morning's one-value solution. The computer works better now, Ethan said. Daniel smiled. It always worked. You finally gave it a fuller story. Ryan stared at the distant steel. I spent all morning telling them to trust the data. They should, but I gave them incomplete data. Then fix the method. Do not blame the tool. The response offered no comfort and no insult. It gave Ryan responsibility, which was more useful than either. The safety officer checked the schedule. 12 minutes remained in the demonstration block. The lane could reopen for one final approved firing sequence if the designated shooter was ready. Ryan looked toward Daniel Springfield. Will you take another shot? Daniel closed the notebook and placed it back inside the leather envelope. No. Your knee? My point is finished. Daniel nodded toward Ryan's modern rifle. Yours is not. Ryan followed his gaze. All morning, he had asked Daniel to prove himself. Now the old veteran was offering him a harder test, one that could not be passed by authority, equipment, or another man's skill. Use your own rifle, Daniel said. Use your own judgment. I will not make the shot for you. When the line went hot again, Ryan settled behind his rifle with none of the swagger he had shown earlier. The equipment had not changed. His optic was still clear. The rangefinder still confirmed 1,600 yards. The ballistic computer still performed its calculations in an instant. What had changed was the person deciding what information belonged in those calculations. Ryan reviewed the Marine's observations and the range monitoring data. He did not copy Daniel's earlier conditions because those conditions no longer existed. The near flag had strengthened. The mirage beyond the ridge had begun to reverse. Ryan waited. Daniel stood behind the line beside Ethan, his Springfield closed in its case. What do you see? Ethan asked him. Enough to know this is Gunnery Sergeant Brooks's shot. He would not turn the moment into another performance. Ryan remained behind the rifle for nearly 2 minutes, then lifted his head. The far section changed, he called. Daniel said nothing. Ethan checked the mirage. Confirmed. Ryan waited again. When the pattern steadied, the range safety officer gave the command. Ryan fired. The distant plate did not move. The impact sensor remained dark. A younger version of Ryan might have blamed the condition, changed a setting immediately, or looked for someone else to explain the miss. Instead, he kept the rifle safely downrange until the safety officer ended the sequence. Then he opened the action and sat back. Missed right, Ethan reported after reviewing the camera. Ryan looked toward Daniel. What did I fail to see? Daniel answered with a question. What changed between your observation and the shot? Ryan replayed the final seconds in his mind. He looked through the spotting scope again and found dust lifting near the middle ridge. The sheltered section opened. Can you support that? Ryan pointed it out to Ethan, who confirmed the movement. The sensor log showed a brief increase in the middle zone at nearly the same time. Ryan nodded slowly. Then the miss belongs to me. Daniel's expression softened. So does the correction. The range safety officer authorized one last round within the scheduled block. Ryan updated the input, but he did not rush to fire before the clock ran out. He observed the flags, the grass, the dust, and the mirage. When the sections formed a pattern he could explain, he settled again. The rifle fired. After the distant delay, the plate rang. The hit was not as dramatic as Daniel's 2 shots. It came from a current precision rifle guided by modern data and a trained Marine. Yet the reaction along the line was different from the applause that had started earlier. The Marines understood what had changed between Ryan's miss and his hit. Ryan cleared the rifle under the safety officer's direction and stood. He did not celebrate. He walked first to Ethan. You were right to challenge how I described the first hit. Ethan nodded. Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant. Then Ryan faced the Marines. My error today was not questioning an extraordinary shot. We verify extraordinary results. My error was deciding our guest had nothing to teach. Before he had spoken, then using this range to make him defend his dignity. No one moved. Ryan turned to Daniel. Mr. Carter, I owe you a direct apology. I treated your age as evidence against you. I treated the rifle as a prop. And when the first shot proved me wrong, I looked for an excuse before I gave you credit. Daniel let the silence hold long enough to keep the apology from becoming a quick escape. I accept it, he said. But an apology matters most in what happens after it. Ryan nodded. Then tell me what should happen. That is your decision, not mine. Ryan looked toward the benches, where modern equipment sat beside the old leather envelope. We add observation before computation to the next clinic. We keep the instruments. We improve the inputs. And no guest who passes the safety requirements gets turned into entertainment. The range safety officer added. We can document today's exercise and submit it to the training coordinator as a pilot block. Ethan lifted the notebook slightly. With Mr. Carter's permission, we can digitize these pages for instruction while preserving the original. Daniel looked at Ryan. Will people use it? Yes. Will they be allowed to question it? Ryan understood the trap. Reverence could become another form of laziness. They will be required to. Daniel released the notebook into his hands. Ryan accepted it with both hands, not as a relic that granted instant wisdom, but as work he was now responsible for continuing. The heritage event ended without a ceremony. No general arrived. No hidden medal appeared. No one discovered that Daniel Carter had once commanded a famous unit or carried a title powerful enough to frighten everyone who had laughed at him. That absence became part of the lesson. Daniel deserved respect before the first shot, not because he might secretly be important, but because age was not proof of incompetence and courtesy did not require a dramatic resume. The 2 hits revealed extraordinary skill. They did not create his human worth. As the range safety officer closed the lane, Daniel packed the M1903A4 with the same care he had shown on arrival. He checked that it was clear, secured it inside the padded case, and placed the maintenance records beside it. The rifle would leave with him. The notebook stayed. Ryan carried the leather envelope to the range office personally. Before stepping inside, he stopped. What should we call the observation block? Daniel shook his head. Not the Carter method. The Avery method. He would object too. Ethan smiled. What about the first line in the notebook? Daniel looked toward the valley. The near flag moved east. Farther out, another drifted west. Above the ridge, the hawk had returned to the rising air. Read the valley, he said. That is enough. 3 weeks later, the first revised clinic began on the same firing line. Ryan stood before a new group of Marines and veterans. The ballistic computers remained on the benches. So did the weather meters and modern optics. Nothing useful had been discarded to make room for nostalgia. But before any rifle came forward, Ryan ordered the line cold and gave everyone a notebook. For the next 10 minutes, he told them, you will record what the valley is doing at more than one distance. Write what you see, write what you cannot confirm, and be prepared to explain what evidence would change your answer. Ethan watched from the observation rail. On the wall behind him, a digital copy of Avery's first page appeared without decoration. Observe before you calculate. The original notebook had been placed in archival storage after scanning, but each class used selected pages. Instructors compared visual observations with environmental data, then showed how incomplete inputs could produce precise, but incomplete answers. The program did not promise impossible accuracy. It taught people to recognize uncertainty before it became false confidence. Ryan also changed the way he corrected mistakes. When a Marine gave an unsupported wind call, he did not laugh. He asked what evidence supported it. When another shooter declined a shot because the conditions could not be defended, Ryan did not call the hesitation weakness. He marked it as sound judgment. The shift was small enough that no press release mentioned it. It was real enough that the Marines noticed. Daniel returned. For the second clinic, he arrived in the same old pickup, wearing the same faded jacket and carrying the Springfield in its locked case. This time, no one asked him to prove that either one belonged. Ryan met him near the gate. "Mr. Carter, would you observe with us today?" Daniel looked toward the firing line. A young Marine was explaining two conflicting flags to an older veteran while both compared notes with a digital display. No one was treating the past as infallible. No one was treating experience as obsolete. "I can do that," Daniel said. They walked to the observation rail together. At the end of the session, Ethan asked Daniel whether he wanted to shoot the 1,600-yard plate again. Daniel considered the wind, the time, and the ache in his knee. "Not today." No one challenged the answer. Ryan simply nodded and asked what Daniel saw. Daniel pointed toward the middle ridge, where a narrow ribbon of dust had begun moving against the nearest flag. "The valley is disagreeing with itself." Ryan raised his binoculars. "Then we should listen before we calculate." Daniel smiled. Far downrange, the two pale marks from the Heritage event remained on separate steel plates. They recorded the shots that had captured everyone's attention. The more important result stood much closer. A gunnery sergeant willing to admit error, a group of Marines taught to question incomplete certainty, and an old veteran whose dignity no longer depended on performing the impossible. 1,600 yards of desert had separated Daniel from the targets. Only a few feet had separated him from Ryan. The harder distance was the one crossed with respect.